So let's talk about hypoglycemia. So hypoglycemia is a fancy word, fancy doctor word, because we can't use normal words, for low blood sugar. A lot of people will say that they were diagnosed with hypoglycemia. Hypoglycemia is not a diagnosis. It is a state. It describes your blood sugar. We don't know the reason. But in this case, we almost always assume it's due to insulin that we've given, maybe a little too much. So hypoglycemia simply means low blood sugar. What happens when our blood sugars are low? Well, if you go a long time without eating, you get hangry, right? What happens? We get irritable, we shake, we may get a headache, we just feel hungry, can't concentrate, and probably just feel weak, low energy, etc. And then in severe cases, your heartbeat starts to rise, you sweat profusely. And so what happens is that in a person without diabetes, it's actually really hard to have the severe symptoms of hypoglycemia because there are other mechanisms in play in the body to prevent us from, for example, getting seizures. In a child who is on insulin, the threshold to get there, in other words, it's the ability to get there is a lot quicker, and so we have to be ultra careful. Okay? This is not a reason to fear insulin. Please hear me out. It's important to be vigilant, but not to be afraid of insulin. Okay? Because insulin is important, but we just have to take precautions. So when we're driving a car, for example, we take the necessary precautions. Look in our blind spots, turn the signal on, wear a seatbelt, etc. Not a reason not to use the car. Just know what we're dealing with. So there are lots of reasons why blood sugars may go low, but typically it's because of more insulin than our body needs. And we have a great way to treat it, okay? So there are two ways to treat it. Most of the time, the treatment is going to be by mouth with quick-acting sugars, so the simple sugars. And in step 2 here, we typically give you the things we think about as quick-acting sugars, and I'll add to them here in a second. So if you ever notice that your child has symptoms or signs of hypoglycemia, or you're just worried, so for example, a typical time would be, a couple hours after a meal, after they've had insulin, or if they've had lots of activity, or they just something doesn't seem right. Check their blood sugar. Always check their blood sugar, okay? And if the blood sugar is under 80. Now, hypoglycemia is typically defined as a blood sugar venous, so in other words, blood sugar under 50. But in diabetes, we use 80, and we can use a glucometer. The reason is we know that when someone's on insulin, this is a real risk that can happen very quickly, and we use a much higher threshold than in somebody without diabetes. And so, we use 80 at our center. Some places may use 70, adults use 70, and that's okay. So that's what we use, is 80. And so if it's, let's say, 65, then you want to treat that blood sugar. And we typically call it the rule of 15s. I will talk about the problem with the rule of 15s in a second. So the next step is to feed the person 15 grams of simple sugars. These are sugars that are going to be quickly absorbed. And so not, for example, peanut butter cracker. That would not be great. But something like half a cup of juice, or some glucose tabs, fruit snack, applesauce, honey. Starbursts are fine. Skittles, I think they say 17 Skittles. Either way, 15 or 17 Skittles should be about 15 grams. Some hard candy. You could use icing. You could use sometimes syrup, just a little bit. So 15 grams, and then you recheck in 15 minutes. So we call it the rule of 15s because it's 15 grams, recheck in 15 minutes. And if the blood sugar is still not above 80, then you repeat the process. So this has for the long time been the rule. If your child is very young, however, let's say 5, 6, 7, etc., or they're just smaller, then you may need less. You could get away with maybe 7 grams or 10 grams. We won't know until it's happened. So during a low blood sugar, the goal is to get you out of that, episode. And so we're almost happy overdoing it initially. The problem is if you overdo it too much, then you'll be fighting highs, and then you'll give insulin, you come back low, and it's just a vicious cycle. So you want to try and hone in what your child may need, and if you need help figuring that out, talk to us. But typically, the standard recommendation has been to follow the rule of 15s. It may be that your child only needs 10 grams to adequately bring him up. And it may depend how low it is. If the blood sugar is 50 versus 70, that's different. If the blood sugar is, 35 versus 65, again, that all depends. So that's what hypoglycemia is. These are the symptoms and how we would treat it.